Good afternoon. This is the March 26th meeting of the Economic Vitality Committee. I note that there is a quorum present here and online. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes, which were online posted and sent to the committee. Is there any additions, corrections to the minutes? And if not, can I get a motion to
Motion
approve?
to accept the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next item of business is, as you know, we have a public hearing coming up on April 9th, in which we will be presenting two zoning articles, one on industrial accessory use in industrial zones and one on parking. And last night, Mimi and I were at the planning board meeting to go a walkthrough. They walked through all of the warrant articles. I think they had about 8 articles. Mimi had been kind enough to prepare a set of slides for each of the 2 articles. And what I'd like to do now is to very quickly go through them. We will send them along to all of the committee members. And if you would be kind enough to let us know any concerns, questions, whatever it is that comes to your mind, and send those to just Mimi and me, don't send them to the entire committee, so we don't violate open meeting law. We had a lot of, I would say, positive input last night from the planning board. So that was good. They were very attentive to both of the articles. So the first one, Mimi, do you want to walk through them, since you're gonna be doing this, doing the clicker anyway,
Sure.
Okay.
So as folks remember, 2 articles, 43 is about retail in the industrial zones. As folks probably know, we've got 5 distinct zones that are zoned industrial. And those already have a mix of different types of small businesses. It includes some historic properties like Damon Mill and the Bradford Mill. This is our map. We're going to be changing this based on some feedback that we got from the planning board that makes it a little clearer to, and then Glenn also had, or Greg had some suggestions about naming them so that people can understand where they're at. So our basic proposal is to basically modestly expand what's allowed there, to allow accessory uses. And it has to be complementary, which is part of the definition of being accessory. So for example, a soap maker, not only can they sell their soap, but they could sell soap dishes that could go along with it. A publisher could sell books. This last one, we're gonna, again, the planning board had some suggestions. Instead of saying warehouse, doing surplus items, it was a little harder. So it could be a guitar maker could sell recordings or, guitar picks and other things that could be connected. The reason we're doing this is to make better use of the existing commercial space that we've got. Concord only has 3% area zone commercial, and we want to maximize the opportunities that are there. It allows some flexibility with very modest impacts, recognizing that a lot of industrial zones include creative producers, and those are the types of folks that we really want to incentivize. And it encourages local shopping that helps contribute to the town's character. And then we're going to define a little bit about what accessory use means, recognizing that it has to be complementary in purpose. So we can't have, that soap maker can't all of a sudden start selling pottery or, t-shirts. It has to be in some ways connected to the core thing that they're doing. So soap maker with a soap dish, they kind of go together.
Can I interrupt just for a second? But we do want to have the soap maker be able to sell T-shirts that have his company name, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Not clothing in general.
Right, yeah, related. That all the other existing controls of what can be allowed there stay in place. And again, by accessory use means that it has to be kind of smaller in size, secondary to the primary use. So it's not that the soap maker is all of a sudden just selling soap. They're still making their soap. That's still their primary thing, why they get to be in that industrial space. The reason why we're approaching this is recognizing it's going to have a very low impact, but can have a positive benefit. It connects with, if we're anticipating very modest changes, there probably won't be any change in signage. Basically, everything will look the same, but it allows some extra business activity to happen there. And recognizing being able to have retail nearby, that helps lower the number of trips people might need to take, for example. And it helps protect especially those historic industrial buildings that can be pretty challenging to reuse. It helps keep those active. And that is our slideshow.
What we heard last night from the planning board was the accessory use definition to move it up earlier in the presentation, get it out of the way fast. And they thought one of the examples of enhancing economic vitality is a warehouse selling surplus items. They thought that was not using the word warehouse was not any way helpful to our cause. But other than that, so we'll send these along.
Mark has some feedback on that.
Oh, hi, yeah, Mark.
Mimi, can you go back to slide number 4? And then is the retail use that's accepted under the use chart, or is it any retail use? I suspect it's permitted retail use in Concord, right?
Right, it has to be associated with the business. So it's not like a separate business, it has to still be like the soap maker selling. They're still running that retail activity.
And again, the building inspector is the final arbiter of this.
But a guitar tuner can sell guitar strings.
Right.
Even though he doesn't make guitars.
Well, you use the example of the brewery, being able to sell, merchandise, clothing, hats, things like that. That'd be considered.
Yeah,
involved in
beer
different-
koozies, yeah.
As long as it was sort of marketing part of it.
Right, right.
It couldn't just be
You're gonna sell a
stacks of.
Elvis shirts.
No, wait a minute.
But the idea on slide number, or one idea on slide number 4, though, is that we are making our industrial zoning and buildings more attractive to potential tenants because of the retail ancillary sale issue, right? So for example, the soap maker who wants to, do whatever in retail wouldn't otherwise come to us if we won't allow that soap maker to sell retail product, right?
Right now, we do allow the soap maker to sell their soap.
That's a bad example. Bad example. Let's just say the brewery selling t-shirts, whatever the heck it is. I think that, I would just make the point that, the enhancing the economic vitality is enhancing either the existing industrial use or making it more attractive to future industrial uses, right? That's what's pushing the vitality.
Right.
Right.
It's broad.
I would just tweak that slide.
Base.
Yeah.
Okay, Mimi, then we will walk through 44, which is parking. And Mark, you probably, I don't know if you and the others were online, but we'll be sending these slides along to everybody. If you have comments, questions, concerns, whatever, shoot your responses back to just Mimi and me. And we'll be amending and putting together a future set of slides. I'd like to get a couple of iterations of that before we hit the public meeting. So Article 44,
You want me to go through this one too?
please.
All right, so 44, this is the one that's inspiring a lot more conversation. So right now we're recognizing that Concord mandates private parking for every business. Even if there's a giant public parking nearby. And we already have ample studies showing that 60% of the parking that's in the commercial district, that's kind of the max that's ever used, where 40% is sitting empty. And right now, the current zoning, by requiring all this additional parking, undermines actually the viability of individual businesses and the district as a whole, where we really want to encourage people to walk from one business to the other. And we want to maintain our historic buildings to their optimum use. So currently, if you move from one use to the exact same use, so a retail to a retail, a barber shop to another barber shop, whatever parking waivers or requirements is parking is not required. It's basically grandfathered in if you stay the same. If there's a change, even if it has a lower parking requirement, that whatever that new use or parking is required, it gets triggered. And oftentimes, as you will see, that there's actually, oftentimes there's no ability to find new parking. So again, even though it might be a full empty parking lot that's owned by the town next to it, that doesn't count. That business is required to find new parking. And what happens is when a new business coming in, that's a change of use, routinely they would go to to get a waiver from those requirements, and routinely that's granted, but it becomes an onerous process for the businesses to do that. And one line from the planning board, one of the members said that so often if the exception is so frequent, we really should think about changing the rule. So the Economic Vitality Committee is recommending what we think is a simple fix, but it'll have a big impact, which is to eliminate the parking requirements when there's changes between permitted use in the districts. So that we're limiting that, so it's basically the property is not changing the square footage at all. If it's a 1,200 square foot space, it's still still 1,200 square feet, no change in the shape. And then it's only changes in permitted uses. So if that use isn't permitted in the district, we're not talking about that. So we're recognizing that the businesses really thrive when we have as active a use as possible. So we want to encourage uses that, you know, people are going to visit. And one of the challenges that we've got is right now that current zoning around their parking requirements puts the onus on the individual businesses that are coming in, rather than recognizing people are walking between them. I think nobody goes to Concord Center and just goes to one spot. You usually go to multiple places. But right now we say each one of them, it's as if you're having to move your car constantly. This graphic here is to kind of illustrate one of the challenges we've got. The big yellow circles show where it's private parking. So those individual properties, you know, are complying with the zoning of how many parking spaces that they need. And you can see that what happens is because it's sort of their parking, oftentimes it's sitting empty. The one on the bottom left is the post office, but that's the parking for their employees, for their vehicles, and it's sitting empty. But where it's shared parking in the public parking lot, you can see how that's being actively used. So currently our kind of splintering of having everybody create their private parking basically means we're being a little miserly and actually not using the available parking that we've got to the optimum. So the consequences, and we're going to probably reframe this based on some suggestions we got, is to think about the consequences of not doing anything. So what if we continue this process of requiring lots of parking, means that we will get lots of parking. We'll get even more lots, more empty lots that makes the area even less walkable, which encourages even more people to have to move their car and drive around rather than going from one business to the other. And we recognize Concord cares a lot about environmental sustainability. We want to reduce the impervious surfaces for our stormwater runoff. We really want to actually start limiting the size of our parking lots. By requiring this, it creates a long permitting process for businesses as they have to go and do these traffic studies, have to get the waiver. That means that's an empty storefront for an extended period of time, which impacts all the other businesses in the district. And it creates a disincentive for the kind of independent small operators that actually create the character in town. We'll end up with sort of the bigger corporate folks that are able to go through those hoops. And we recognize we really care about the historic properties in Concord. And we're creating an incentive to actually have them demolished to make way for parking, which nobody really wants. And we want to optimize the value of those historic properties so that they can be maintained in the beauty that they have now. And we recognize that the buildings in Concord Center, West Concord, were built before cars were ever developed. So those individual properties are oftentimes built almost out to the full lot. Right now, our parking requirements means that you literally only have 20% of the lot would be a building and the rest would be parking. And that's not part of why everybody loves Concord Center, is because it is walkable and intimate that way. And right now, our current zoning says that businesses have to find parking. And then we have a series of maps that show basically the properties, the districts are built out. Let me show you the one that's kind of the most dramatic is 9 Acre Corner. The red line shows the borders of the district. You can see the individual buildings in brown, and then the yellow is where all the parking currently exists. So there could be a circumstance where somehow a business going in there would need to find more parking, and it's like, I'm in a sea, I can't swim, I can't add more water to the sea of parking I'm in. And you can see that that's the pattern in the other districts. So this is Concord Center, this is the Road Depot, and I accidentally put in Concord Center twice, so we'll fix that. We recognize that this is the impact of this small change could be significant in terms of boosting the value of the individual properties. It helps preserve the historic character of our neighborhoods and helps support our sustainability goals. And we're doing this to be able to maintain the existing building fabric. So basically, we like the look of the downtown right now, and we don't want to change that. So we don't want to create incentives to undermine that, and helps remove the regulatory hurdles for small businesses.
Mark,
So maybe that, that's a lot, right? You said a lot of different things that I'm not quite sure I followed all of them, but what is like your 2 bullet point reason why we're doing this?
We're doing this because right now we want to incentivize changing, allowing businesses to be able to change use to be more flexible as the market changes. So for example, Phillips Paint has been sitting empty for a long time. We're most likely not going to get another hardware store. So we want to be able to allow some flexibility for businesses to come in and recognize that building never had parking, has no means to create more parking. So we want to remove one of the hurdles to be able to actively, to put an active tenant back into that building.
I think also, Mark, it should be said that the town has a tendency to grant the permission after a considerable amount of time and money is spent. We're trying to eliminate that issue, that just do it.
Yeah, I think that I'm just,
Come into town and not to spend $100,000 in studies and waste 2 or 3 months, and the landlord doesn't want to wait, so they go somewhere else, and all those other issues that you're familiar with, those go away as far as parking is concerned. Everything else is on the table, but at least parking is, you're confident that you don't have to worry about it.
yeah, and I just 17 slides, I think is a lot, and I think it's going to be tough to get through. So I would encourage Mimi and Mike. I think we just need a shorter presentation because we said a lot of stuff about big impact. I think you were talking about possibly when you're talking about expanding value, we're talking about expanding square footage. I'm not sure we want it. So I don't know. I just think that there are a lot of slides there. I was hoping for a simple message and a simple rationale.
So for Mark, what do you find compelling? As an advocate for economic vitality, what would be a compelling argument or compelling way to say it from your perspective?
I'm not sure I'm the right person, Mimi. I'm not sure I'm totally on board with this. So I still like the Phillips thing. I get it, right? Because, a couple of years ago, the planning board codified what used to be, I guess, more of an informal test. So I get it. I'm all for codifying it. I parking studies, I get. I don't know. I mean, I think parking is a huge problem in Concord. I don't think we've really cracked the code there yet. I see people parking in front of, so for example, like, Camellas. We have people parking in front of Camellas for 3 or 4 hours. You really shouldn't be doing that. So I want 1 hour parking. I want signage. If you want to park for 3 hours, go park behind Middlesex Savings. Don't park in front of Camellas. I'm a little bit concerned of like the free for all of, hey, I get the realities of where we are in parking, but I do have some reservation as to how this will be rolled out. And I'd love to hear from Linda, because I suspect the planning board must have some recommendations and some reservations maybe to how to tailor this. So I don't know, I'm happy to give comments, Mike, I'm happy to shoot you back notes, but I don't think I've ever been in favor of this necessarily, maybe because it's too broad, but I just like a more simple message, that's all.
Well, Mark, I want to hear from Linda. Linda was at the meeting last night, and has been there as we made numerous presentations. For me, the punchline is quite simple, Mark. If I'm introducing, if I go into Phillips with some kind of change in use, there is no way I can create parking. I can't do it. There is no parking to be created. So what is the point of putting a business through the process of having to go figure out that they can't do that and then coming to us to get a waiver so that they don't have to do it? It just seems to me mindless.
And I would say that oftentimes if the business does need parking, they will figure it out. They'll make a deal, like, for example, here at Concord Center, they talk to the Holy Family, they get a lease for it. That's things that can be worked out among the business owner can figure it out and not have to be the requirement.
Well, I think it's taking parking out of the little teeny cubicle it's in is that the site has to produce parking when parking is really a social burden, not that little teeny business's burden. That we have 1750 to 1850 office retail businesses that have no way of creating, and we're saying, create some parking, otherwise burn your building down. I mean, do we really want to get to the point where somebody does start taking buildings down in the center of town and like knocking the teeth out so they can meet a parking thing? Is that, because that is a possibility of happening, and that would be, I think, unwanted. So I don't think this article has absolutely nothing, and Linda, I'm sorry for filibustering here, but this article has nothing to do with me, I don't do this, but parking in front of Cabela's for 4 hours. That's a completely separate issue of the select board and work with the policing people and figure out how to get over it, and we've wrestled with that since I was a little boy. But this has to do with individual properties trying to run businesses and not putting them in the impossible situation of saying, you can do it if you can jump 12 feet high.
Linda?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that right now we don't have a master plan for parking, which would be great. But it would be difficult to develop it because we can't have smart parking until we get some kind of cell service. So the question is, what do we do that has an opportunity for economic vitality rather than solves our parking issues? Because I think right now they're at a bit of a standstill, but everyone has recognized them, but we're a little bit boxed in. So here, the question is, I don't know that it's a big solution, but I think that I think it's a worthwhile question to put to people in the town, is if we can realize that we are boxed in with parking, then this gives some, I would say, modest relief for operators of small businesses throughout our business districts in terms of their flexibility to change some of the uses of their buildings without going through red tape of getting a parking study that, as you say, ultimately comes out close to what was there before, and the planning board, trying to be pragmatic, says is probably okay to make that change. So I think it really is something that can be put to the town in terms of improving economic vitality as opposed to a solution for parking.
All right, thank you, Linda. So again, please, we got a lot of comments last night from the planning board on both of these articles. Mimi and I will first of all send you these as they exist. Please give us whatever feedback you've got, adjusting the two of us so we stay in compliance with laws. And then we'll put together an additional deck and get it distributed to everybody, so we get a couple of rounds before the public hearing on the 9th. All right, thank you very much.
One more comment.
Mark, yeah,
Hey, Mike, the only advice, only recommendation I would do is, if you guys could somehow pare down the 17 slides to sort of
yeah.
I agree.
talk about what.
We already got that, we got that feedback. The stumbling block for me on the size, we can combine slides and get it down to a more manageable number. The representation problem that I'm having is the one that Mimi articulated with respect to the maps. How do we demonstrate that point? You know, it's clear, when you look at 9-acre corners, but, you know, that one doesn't count in some ways because it's not as complicated. So how do we get across that point? So any suggestions on how to do that would be very helpful.
I mean, if you wanna, you could always put it in an appendix, you know what I mean, and not have to go through them in your presentation.
Oh, we'll have backup slides and things like that, but I think that point needs to be made.
Yes, okay,
So, you know, when you were talking about Phillips, I was thinking instead of a map, put up Phillips and talk about it. And then have the camera just go, you know, around and ask where you would like Phillips replacement
Make it
to
a
put their
virtual
new parking.
reality.
What the slides really did for me was it showed that, for the most part, it's buildings, parking. So you've maxed it out.
That's done.
So, you know, without a parking garage or some huge expense, you kind of bought your ticket.
Linda, what is her hand?
Linda, please.
I was just going to comment that this is the presentation for the public hearing. And at that public hearing, you should get continued public feedback. The moderator will most likely be there and will then move to helping you define the amount of time that you will have at town meeting. And at that point, you'll have another go through to refine the slides. So I think sometimes it's okay to present more information at the public hearing than you would likely do at town meeting, where you're really drilling down on those, you know, let's make it simple and obvious and visual and move through and then have backup slides. So I think that this is something that you want to, again, polish, but I don't think this is your last chance. This is just an intermediate phase.
No, that's absolutely correct. Whatever we do at town meeting will be a slimmed down version of this, number one. And also, just for those of you that don't know, every year at town meeting, there's tables full of handouts, and that's not gonna happen. And what's gonna happen is the town's gonna put together a briefing book, so anybody who wants a piece to be handed out at town meeting is going to this briefing book. And one is gonna be sent to each household, so for those on the committee, Cato and Glenn are already working on making sure we put that together, so when you go to town meeting, it's your slides plus the handout that is the representation you make at town meeting, so thank you, Linda.
Mark has one more comment.
Mark, yeah.
Yeah, so I would just say, because I think parking can be a somewhat controversial and inflammatory topic, I would just narrow this down so you don't have guys like me asking about parking in general, 1 hour parking, what have you. So the example you gave of Phillips, or like the new business, the change, is the perfect example. You could cite the fact that traffic studies cost $5,000 to pop and blah, 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 and focus on that. I just think that if you walk in with a broad presentation, you're going to receive a lot of feedback you don't want, and you're going to start opening up cans of worms that you don't want. So just narrow the topic.
All right, good point, thank you very much. Updates, quickly, business survey, Tiffany.
Yeah, so I put together a deck.
Do
that
you
we
want to
can-
share from you or you want, I've got it set up on my.
Yeah, why don't we just use yours just in case? So this is, speaking of long presentations, there's a lot of slides in here, but I will go through them quickly and can share this, I believe, after without it violating any open meeting rules. I can share like the full deck
You
after.
can send it to all of us.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if I could do it beforehand.
Where we could have put it as part of the meeting material.
Okay, okay.
That's the way you do it.
So yeah, so here we have our first readout of the business survey. If you go to the next slide, Mimi, just to remind us of what the goals of this survey were, because I think as we've talked through the timeline and then sort of the objectives and went through the questions, it was easy for it to go off the rails and wanna boil the ocean, so to speak. So really what we were looking is to get feedback from our retail businesses, primarily our ground floor brick and mortar retail businesses here in Concord. So we could have a bench of best fit businesses so that we're more proactive in recruiting and retaining our existing businesses. And in a nutshell, our purpose is that we want any vacant storefronts that exist, we wanna move businesses into those quickly. And how funny, we just talked about streamlining businesses in both articles we just discussed. So if you move to the next slide, we had a pretty good response rate considering there's a big database of all of the different types of businesses here in Concord, but Mimi and I, especially Mimi, narrowed those down more to 79 retail businesses, which really had the profile of the ones that we're talking about. Again, our ground floor retail that you're walking in and you're shopping and you're walking out with something, you're going in and you're sitting down and having a meal, etc. And so we had a response rate of about 20%, which is higher than average, honestly, for a lot of these kinds of surveys. Concord Center taking the biggest share there of response rate, but pretty even distribution overall. And then the next portion of the deck, if you just go to the next slide, this is just like, I'm going to go through these very quickly to just highlight some interesting findings. 80% of those folks who did fill out the survey were the owners, so that's great, valuable data here. 50% of the respondents identified as retail. We gave them a large menu, as you can see on the right, that they could get more granular, but mainly identified as retail. Again, we had even representation across shopping districts, with Thoreau Street and Niagara Corner being the smallest, but considering they're smaller in terms of their shopping availability, that makes sense and tracks. Employee recruitment and retention, was mainly not a problem. We had, a quarter of respondents saying it was, but the majority didn't feel that strongly about it. Yeah, if we felt like we needed to dig into that more, we absolutely can. So I wouldn't say like just ignore this data point altogether. But that's what came back from our sample size. And then because we did have a somewhat small sample size, despite it being 20%, the business environment questions, you can see that the bulk of people noted consistent foot traffic, lower rents. Parking did come up, Mark, as you can see, public shared parking. But I would say that, these, despite the numbers next to them being on the smaller side, given the sample size we had, I think this tracks to what we expected anyway. And that even if we had a larger sample size, I would estimate that these would be the same issues that would continue to be flagged. So some interesting things on the business environment there. And then these next slides are a little wordy, so probably will be better to digest once I send them out after. But in terms of asking retailers, what other businesses would they like around them? Food and beverage was the ones we heard from most. And then this concept of complementary and practical stores. So a combination of folks saying it would be really exciting if we just had shops that we knew had built-in audiences and that they had this excitement to them we just need like a retail, we need just more clothing stores. We need somewhere where we can just kind of get those basic services without having to leave the town. And then on the lower end where the personal services, spa wellness, health, community-centered spaces. But really, I think, as we expected, food and beverage continue to be something that folks want here. Tough because of the water situation. and moving into it, asking customers, what's missing. So this was, we had a lot, this was interesting, it was an open-ended question, and no one skipped over this, like folks really wanted to talk about and really tell us what they felt was missing. So again, food and beverage, retail essentials were the top line items. I'll move into the next slide, entertainment and community spaces, and then there were things with services and infrastructure, which again, I think we've talked about just right here, better cell phone coverage, more parking. Someone wrote police presence, but it was only one response. So I wouldn't put a ton of weight on that, and bike racks was another one that came up, interestingly enough. And then concerns about the business mix, there was folks who felt, you know, too many banks and real estate office kind of taking up that precious ground floor retail, limited retail variety in some districts, those gaps in retail services. Some businesses, depending on the district where they were, I think you saw this a lot more in like on the road depot, where businesses just felt they weren't getting quite as much foot traffic because of the mix of businesses in that area. They noted that, for example, one person noted that only Karma's open for lunch, which isn't quite true. It's only sit-down restaurant open for lunch. That was something that they were identifying. And
There was a need for more restaurants, and somebody called out too high a concentration of food businesses.
yeah, and again, that's where I think you're seeing that depending on where you are. So it was interesting if you like dug into the individual responses. You would see that in West Concord, where not a lot of places are open for lunch, that came up. But at the same time, there are a lot of places open for lunch. So it was just like, that was one where it was just kind of hard to really, in thinking about all of, except 9 Acre Corner would be the only one I would think of. The rest of the business districts really do have at least like 3 or 4, even 5 restaurants open for lunch, so that I'm not quite sure where they were. There were some comments that said it would be great if there was more affordable dining. And like West Concord's another good example here. If we could have something that didn't feel like it was just Woods Hill that everyone gravitated to. But again, I think if you look at the composition of restaurants in that area, there are those available. So, surveys. And then finally, just wrapping up here in terms of town government support. Parking and traffic was a big concern, as we've already discussed in this. And here we have prohibit all day parking without meters as something someone offered. And then some small comments just on public space maintenance that I think were really like a lot of one-offs and more individual experiences than sort of cumulative experiences in this. Zoning and business friendly policies, which is wonderfully timed for the 2 articles that we're presenting. And then this final survey, capacity building and local support. The things that were reflected in the other questions as well, bike racks and more cell phone coverage. And I think when you look at what things folks thought were missing, and then you look at like what government support they felt would, you know, was also needed, you see a lot of sequencing that happens here. It's like, okay, so we need more parking, but we probably don't want to do that by building independent structures for that. We want to work with what we have, but what we have doesn't have meters that can sort of help create that natural parking flow that you want, so someone isn't camping out in a spot, but we can't do that until we have more cell phone coverage. So I think a lot of these, as a roadmap, sort of built out on what these high priorities are. I think that's what we need to pay attention to, is like sort of how all these pieces fit together, and streamlining businesses to the 2 articles we just talked about. I think that fits into the puzzle as well. So the next steps in this is I will meet with 3 or 4 different individuals, probably with you, Glenn, to see if this maps with some findings that the chambers had. He's not sure right now. Mimi, who had you recommended that we could chat with?
I thought Tyler Spring would be, who's a commercial broker.
Yeah, and I say, hey, is this resonating with you? Do you have any additional feedback? And then I think taking these findings and really figuring out how they click into either the articles that we're supporting, other initiatives that maybe the planning team is doing, like if there is something around parking that becomes the MCI Concord piece, if there were a little bit more water from that. I think these findings, beyond creating a bench of businesses a business profile that we know we can go after and fill those vacancies quicker. This can also help us understand how these other bigger town initiatives can help complement economic vitality because of the findings of the survey, so.
Tiffany, you've got a response rate of 20%, very large, right here, but I thought when we talked about this before, we're gonna make a second effort now to go back and try to get responses from those we didn't get, even if we have to do it.
So I do know that I had said that, and then in hindsight and looking at this, this was something that I discussed with Mimi, I think that if we try to do that, it will mainly be a lot of free flow conversations that won't necessarily anchor to the questions in the survey. And so I think it's fine, but it would just add a lot of different, it would probably repeat a lot of data points that we have here. But I feel like what it would do is create a lot of very specific one-offs that I don't know that we would really be able to address.
Well, I have in mind two sort of approaches. One, I think I understand. Well, I'm not talking about going into Greg and saying, what the hell's wrong with you? Here, fill us out, you moron. I'm just saying, we know who hasn't done it. Are we doing a follow-up to say to them personally, this is really important to the town. We really would appreciate your input.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think we can, I mean, we were pleased with what we got back. I think we could easily, we were trying to stick to the timeline we had mapped out too. But I think it would be very easy for us to pull the remaining businesses and prompt them one more time, or if we wanted to have, a flyer available at the town meeting and see if anyone bites on that.
Did anybody say why they weren't filling out? Did somebody say I'm too busy to just shun you or?
No, they just didn't fill it
Just
out,
didn't do it.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
didn't do it.
yeah.
And if you know what-
So there was no resist?
No resistance, and in the open-ended questions, if people didn't know the answer, they just said, I don't know. You know, they didn't skip questions either, which was
What if we
really,
mail them copies, hard copies,
Yeah.
just make it easier instead of scanning.
One thing is going back to a little bit of our goal isn't necessarily to get a complete survey.
Yeah.
Our goal is to help understand what would be a good fit. And I had a great conversation about Anita, who's got the new shoe store in West Concord, who just opened 2 weeks ago or so. And it was interesting understanding, instead of just thinking like, we need more retail or we need more clothing, it's like, she's a really good fit because she's got men's and women's shoes. She happens to be between a women's clothing on one side, men's clothing on the other side. And her particular niche of shoes is that it's the wellness ones where it's no arch, meant to exercise your feet. She's got these ones that are supposed to kind of ground you electronically. It's got this copper thing. So it's kind of got this wellness thing. So she's directly across the street from Deborah's, which is like her tie-in. Her price point is like a little, it's not like the super high end, you know, they're still $150 shoes, but they're not $500 shoes, which fits with the price point. So a little bit's gonna be recognizing, and we're gonna be massaging this as we go along. And I think instead of overspending too much time on the survey, my suggestion was for us to actually just start thinking about doing that kind of level of thinking with the sufficient data that we've got and start looking at the individual, who's next to who and what are the spaces that exist that would fit in that spot. Because we could dig into this data even more, but we also recognize like we want to start getting into the meat of the task sometime this year. We can.
And we have 2 questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So, this is great. And I guess I have 2 asks. Number one, I think priorities are always important, right? So it's great that we have all this data, but I would love to see, like, based on this data, here are the top 3 to 5 priorities. Because what are we going to do with it? I suspect that we're going to either write a letter to the select board or whomever to say, hey, based on our survey, here's what we'd like people to focus on. So I think priorities are important. Number 2, you know, probably because it's campaign season or there are all these forums, you know, one of the most popular questions and topics is, what are we going to do with MCI? So I think that, you know, you can almost, assume that MCI is going to be our new 4th business district. And what businesses do people want at MCI? You don't have to necessarily say, I guess you could. They're going to be complementary to the existing businesses we have to avoid cannibalization. So I think it could be a super helpful exercise to, number one, prioritize what the challenges are, and then number two, use it for some direction for MCI, because I think the town is going to need direction for MCI.
Yeah, I think like I don't know that this is meant to set the priorities in terms of these larger issues that we've flagged, such as parking and cell coverage and water. What it's meant to do is, as Mimi just pointed out, is be used as this data point to help find the complementary businesses for those vacant storefronts. That's like priority number one. And then, as I think I said a little earlier, I then think it becomes a complementary data point for initiatives like MCI Concord, for parking initiatives from the town, for, you mentioned that it's campaign season. We have a lot of the candidates talking about the cell phone coverage being a big part of their platform. So it's more, I think it can be, because I don't know that it can be truly seen as an instrument for driving town priorities, because the data isn't that clean. It's more anecdotal than it is a real proper survey methodological approach that we've taken here.
Just a follow-up question. So who is going to be doing all this recruiting?
So that's part of the role of an economic vitality committee usually, is to build relationships with, because you all shop regularly in the neighborhood. So for example,
No, but that's not going to happen, right? So, for example, if you, Mimi, are not going to do this, then what's going to happen is brokers or outside capitalist influences will drive it. So it's great to have this, but unless one of us is going to be the chairperson, the cheerleader, the recruiter, I'm a little bit puzzled as to who's going to use this information, how we're going to attract suitable businesses.
So going back to the shoe store, Anita's, she has a store in Acton. She has people who live in Concord. She regularly goes to Deborah's, and when she saw that there was a location available that was gonna be able to be a toehold in another spot. She's not so happy in the strip mall that she's in right now. It's on a decline. She's sort of looking at, how can I move here? So that's one that's nearby, that's got a built up market. So I recognize the work is gonna be of the brokers and me, but that's sort of a thing that I think that's what Tiffany signed on to. That's what the project is.
Well, it's also, I think, there's a lot of town staff that impacts a business coming in, and not that there would be overt favoritism but to let all those people know that this is a business that is fitting into what it seems we need, versus treating it just coldly like you might see some gain in that regard. You know what I mean?
Linda's got her hands up.
Linda?
Now, I just had a question with regard to the restaurant issue, and obviously until we have the water situation dealt with, that's going to be somewhat a constraint. But I was wondering if, given that a couple of years ago the planning board allowed food trucks, and Mimi has put a lot of work into that, and we'll know a lot more about food trucks in the next month or so, would that possibly be a way to add that restaurant experience if we thought about relaxing some of the rules for the food trucks? And just to throw it out there, because it might be something to think about. Would that be valuable in terms of some of the business centers? I mean, I'm not looking for an answer, just maybe,
I do, sorry, Linda, I do agree with Mark in that I think we should have a cohesive, if not shared, at least internal set of goals or objectives that we'd like to accomplish, and we can share, we can pick and choose what we'd like to share up the ladder or widely, but, having some objectives. For instance, you know, trying to drive more restaurant operators in, whether that's part-time with food trucks or whatever, but I think there should be some kind of stated, you know, mission from this or inform this.
Yeah, I hope one of the things that comes out of this when we're done is we can develop 2, 3, 4, how many clear issues that we can tackle. Whether we tackle it with food trucks or not, you know, beside the point, if parking continues to do it, we can get, you know, the select board deals with that kind of issues, Linda and her committee deals, those kinds of issues, we can tee them up and try to drive them. I think that's a perfect result of doing it. And it also informs Mimi in her professional life as a vitality.
I think we need
Yeah.
some kind of action plan.
These are the kind of things that we should be looking for, and, you know, as I've said all along, the restaurants that have come in since I've been involved in this kind of stuff, Karma, the Bandoleros, those kind of things have all been restaurants that were successful in other towns. And then came in here, and then have gone on and even added more. So, you know, if it's a clothing store, let's look at the surrounding metro area and see if there's a successful independent clothing store. I think so.
And I wanna echo something that Mark said too, that I think is important, is that he's right, that like. I'm now, having conducted the survey, not going to go out and like be recruiting businesses as an individual, and so I understand that point. But I do feel like. Making that contact with the business owners, now having a bank of information that we can say, well, rather than always get the bespoke retailer, like maybe we do get someone that's more like a buy and dine, because that's the kind of service that someone wants, and we can speak with brokers, and we can try to, you know, like have that information that the next step can be going to building owners or whoever it is and say, if it's possible to fill or prioritize these businesses instead, because it will build out that diversity that we're looking for. And for all we know, they can come back and say like, you know, ground floor banks do it for us, like that is guaranteed rent, and then that's a different problem we solve. So I do think though that the objectives of this committee is to listen to the business owners, and we have some really big issues that have been substantiated that we've known existed, but the survey is really meant to just be this like great data point to help us say a new agey kind of shoe store that fits in with the Dead Bros and the two real retailers, like now that is a unique fit that is better than, I don't know, I don't wanna like pit stores against each other, but it's like, oh, cool, like that is a really nice complementary business, and like a high heel store wouldn't have worked there or whatever, like bad example, but it's not.
So, will we make
Mark had a.
will we make one more sort of low-key pass at those who haven't?
Yeah, we can do, yeah,
To see if we can get
Yeah.
some more response. Mark?
So just 2 recommendations, maybe just to Mimi. Number one, I think it would be worthwhile if you haven't to speak with some of the restaurateurs in person, you know, so go talk to, you know, the 3 or 4 that come to top of the head. And, you know, it's sort of, what's interesting, at least my experience, is that, you know, it's very easy to get a table in Concord after 8 o'clock. So although these, you know, the restaurants shockingly closed down. I mean, try to get a takeout dinner at 8:30. To try to get it at 9. So post-COVID, everyone's closing early. So, you know, go talk to a bunch of people who run restaurants and ask them what they think. And I've actually done that with a couple of folks. And then number 2, you know, the economic vitality officers in Maynard, Burlington, Lexington all deal with this issue. So I would just ask them, you know, if they have this database, how do they maximize, you know, how do they leverage it? Because I don't want to say we're reinventing the wheel, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I think we have some great data. We have some great contacts. You guys have spent a ton of time with this, which is awesome. But I really want to leverage it to maximize the impact.
Thank you. Cato is not able to be here. you wanna give a quick update to what you and Cato are working on?
We're working, I think we spoke about it earlier, we met earlier today about it, of just focusing on getting some slides and project to go in front of, eventually go in front of town meeting with the 2 warrant articles. And, we're probably 20% of the, 15% of the way there in terms of doing it. The meeting again Monday, and I agree with Mark that it's gotta be succinct in a few bullets, and it's got to be clear and clean, and we're not there yet.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we'll get there.
We'll get there. And Mimi, do you wanna sort of give a 2-second update on the position paper? Or meeting when, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's not till April.
April, and, I'll just say that we're meeting, Rufus are meeting to start developing ideas about what the finance committee and select board. And a number of us, Mimi included, and I visited Littleton, to talk to their town manager, which are for about an hour and a half, about their development called Point, which in my mind is very similar to Mayor Crossing. And not talking about what it looks like or what it is, but the process of how they went through it and, you know, how they dealt with the various issues and came up with it was informative to everybody, so that was helpful. Okay, so next, Beth isn't able to be here with us, but she gave me this to report. The visitor centers opened earlier than expected due to record crowds and merchandising sales. Hours now are March 30th, from 10 to 3 daily, and starting March 31st, 9 to 4 daily. Patriots of Color Tour launched with great success and an opening celebration at the Umbrella Center on March 15th. Free tours now run every Saturday at 1:30 p.m. until June 30th. Thanks to Mott, that's the Massachusetts Travel and Tourism grant for $25,000. Conference 50 held its 5th and final business meeting on March 14th. The event was recorded and sent out to a list of over 700 business emails. Conference 50 communications team has created a wonderful webpage of frequently asked questions on the Town 250 site and visitor site. Lots of great how-tos are there, including and being updated weekly with new and changed information. So that's her report. Report from the Economic Vitality Manager.
And the food safety program is wrapping up. Over 80 people got trained and obtained their ServSafe certification, so that's required if you're doing food service. And then folks are also getting their allergen awareness certification. 6 farms are receiving $3,000 grants for fridges and freezers to upgrade their farm stands. And 10 food businesses received grants of $1,500. So a number of the brick and mortars are taking part in the 250th with the help of some of our displays. So Hope Coffee is gonna have an outside cart. Camilla's is gonna be having slices. Barrel Farm is gonna be doing, actually they came under the farm grant. So those all are getting $1,500 to help do their equipment. And there's sort of a smidgen of some of the things came in slightly under budget, so basically everybody who applied for a grant has been able to get one. And I'm sort of reaching out to give out the last little drinks. The benches that I got the grant from Mott, those were installed and they're now distributed through West Concord or through Concord Center. And I'm working on a program for West Concord for a set of benches. We don't have grant funding for that, but some people have approached me saying that they want to donate funds for benches. So going before the select board, the Green Thumbs, it has provided funds to do a bench there. And I'll be working with a team of folks to identify the sites where those could be. And then looking forward to, with select board approval, to be able to raise money for those. Going back to actually Mark's comment about a lot of the restaurants being pretty empty later at night. I'm working on a program called Third Thursdays. It's going to kick off in June. So it'll be the third Thursday of every month in Concord Center, partnering with the Concord Cultural Council with their Concord Center grant. So the idea is having the retailers stay open till at least 8. And it's sort of a combination of some of the retail offices so that they're going to do a meet and greet. The liquor store says they're gonna do a wine tasting. Cumbella said that they'd welcome a little solo performer and have a little music there. So we'll have like pop-up things everywhere and try to get everybody to stay open at least till 8 o'clock. And then maybe then you can go to fill up the restaurants and be a little around later. So we're kind of doing it as an experiment every month through until December. Because some of the folks had told me Concord Center used to be open every Thursday late,
Yeah.
and it kind of
Yeah.
declined, so that's why we chose Thursday. So we're gonna do it through the year and kind of commit to that, and then we'll reassess. The 250th is reaching a fever pitch, and so I'm part of the team that's working on things like that, including, there's gonna be a new wayfinding sign comparable to the one that's in front of the visitor center, that's going on the side of Concord Provisions. And then the age-friendly initiative is going on to a new phase where we're doing the one-on-one meetings with the businesses to develop our kind of age-friendly toolkit. And basically, we're gonna be documenting all the great practices that the businesses are doing, and then giving them some suggestions on low or no cost things that they could do to be more accommodating to older customers.
Yeah. Thank you very much, busy woman. Before I turn to public comments, I have one piece of business that, what's not on the agenda, so we're not gonna discuss it, but I'll tell you what it is. This I'm reading from a letter from, the chairman of the select board, chairperson of the select board. The select board recently established a land use working group to summarize future town needs and recommends best matches between needs and available land. The working group has two objectives to be accomplished, and one is to develop recommendations, and the second is to review options and proposals. And through this letter, she is asking, I kindly request that you nominate a member of your board or committee no later than April 30th to be a member of this committee. So what I will do when I get home is I will send you a copy of this letter, and I will send you also the charge of the committee. I would ask you to review it, and if you are interested, or if you think of someone on the committee that would be good for that assignment, please write just to me. So again, so we don't violate open meeting laws, and then it will be on our agenda for our April meeting. Yes,
Oh, do we have a date for our April meeting? Cause
No,
between the April.
for right after we have comments, that's what we're gonna do. All right, so asking if there are any public comments. Linda, Carol, you're our public today.
Mark.
Okay, so let's turn.
Did Mark his hand? Mark did.
Mark, you're not part of the public, but excellent.
Hey, Mike, so I think the land use chart is great. And hopefully that will dovetail into the new capital plan that's being worked on, so we can sort of start putting pieces in place for the next 10 years on what we're going to spend our money on. And I know in the past we've talked about, sewer capacity being a huge issue for us. Do you know, has there been any discussion or any evolution of, any progress on the idea of either exploring new land or somehow expanding sewer capacity? I continue to think it, just like this land use chart is great, is there a similar type of thing we can do on the sewer side to make sure we're focusing on and potentially, creating more capacity?
So,
Linda, would you care to comment on that?
Well, if you, getting back to your earlier comment about MCI Concord, there is a wastewater treatment facility there. And the town has been exploring, whether, they can work out an agreement, to acquire that, from the state. So that's, currently at the select board level, and in discussions with the rest of what might go on at MCI Concord. Beyond that, I'm not aware of any other options other than at some point the state may update their wastewater wastewater treatment parameters. So the issue there is that there's been a lot of change in terms of the use of water in appliances that has reduced the actual flow required over the past 20, 30, 40 years, but the wastewater requirements set by the state in terms of per unit of housing hasn't changed. So if the requirements were to be upgraded, then that would change. Even though we wouldn't build any more wastewater treatment, it would mean that our existing wastewater capacity could serve more homes and businesses. But I have very little insight into that process as well. So, so there
Yeah.
are sort of two elements.
We learned that the prison, wastewater has a daily capacity of 300,000 gallons, and currently about 80,000 is being used by the farm and the state police barracks. The issue there is though that there's a lot of deferred maintenance associated with that particular facility. Mark, have your hand up again?
Yeah, so just, I think, and I might not be getting it exactly correct, but just to put it in perspective, I think that our capacity is right around, let's call it 1.2 million. And if MCI, even if we can expand it, so my understanding is that 300, 100 goes to the state, 100 goes to MCI, we might get 100 out of it. So 100 on top of 1.2 is like 8%. So 8% is not going to help us as far as our next 20 years of business development and growth. So I just think it's really incumbent upon the select board and the DPW and others to really try to use all available means to figure out what the opportunities are. And I know it's expensive, but you know, we're spending money left and right on other initiatives. So I just think we should make a bigger push because, you know, for me, even if MCI pans out the way it does, it's less than a 10% capacity bump.
I'm not sure that it's well, I shouldn't speak for the select board, but the issue is also the EPA and being able to get a license for discharge. So there's many barriers, I think, in terms of regulatory issues that really, I'm not sure that land management and planning can address in terms of getting permitted for additional discharge into the waterways in and around Concord. But I assure you, I'm no expert there.
And thank you, Linda. Other public comments? All right, let's plan for our April meeting then. And April.
Maybe the 19th.
Yeah, I'm gonna be away, the 21st through the 30th.
Well, I think we have to meet to be able to comply with the select board. I think we need to meet before the 30th.
Yeah.
Right. So
That would be the 23rd.
23rd, is that?
I won't be here.
Go on vacation, no.
Enjoy yourself.
Say what?
I'll be out of town that week, but
You'll be out of town and undergo a little zooming.
I might be able to zoom in. I'll be abroad, but
Mhm.
I should
Yeah,
be able to.
that's-
Internet connection.
All right, well, let's plan for that meeting, and what I will do, in addition to sending this piece out about the land use, I'll also ask queries from everybody who wasn't here today, whether they'll be able to make the April 23rd meeting. meeting?
I was just thinking, I think Shannon is out that week, so I'll make sure that there's a staff person just in case of like letting people in the door and things like that.
Okay, well, or I'll get a key, I can get a key from Andrea or somebody to be able to do that. All right, any other business? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it.